Okay, so this is our history class online. So what we're going to be doing is I'm going to read the history lessons. We'll only have a Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday history class. We won't be having Book of Fame or quizzes over this while we're doing online courses. Today is March 30th, so it's the Monday class. And if you'll notice up here behind me on the board, I have history, and I have the title, The Rise of Adolf Hitler, is our lesson today. So we move into World War II, and the date, 1933. So you need to make sure you have your history notes. Make sure you get this written down. Some of you, it helps you pay attention to write notes, and some of you would rather just listen to the story. So I'm going to go ahead and read the story for you. I want you to be a really good listener and focus and pay attention. But it's up to you how many notes you take. And then be sure to Marco Polo if you have questions. Okay, so let's get started. The rise of Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler once boasted that the newly formed Third Reich would last 1,000 years. Thank God he was wrong. The Nazi-led Third Reich of Germany lasted only 12 years and 4 months. Of course, because of Hitler's role in the Holocaust, those 12 years and 4 months were disturbingly gruesome. It would take us several lessons to cover this traumatic time period that provoked a Second World War. We will begin by looking at the eerie, unstoppable rise of Adolf Hitler, who led the Third Reich from its uncanny beginning to its destructive end. Adolf Hitler was born in Austria-Hungary on April 20th, 1889. His 52-year-old father, Alois, was a customs official. Alois had a strict personality and was on his third marriage at the time of Adolf's birth. Adolf's mother, Clara, was a farm girl. Clara was a second cousin to her husband and 28 years old when Adolf Hitler entered the world. Little did the couple know that their temperamental son would aspire to build a super race of Germans. They themselves were ordinary folks with their own troubles. They were raising 2 children from the previous marriage of Alois and 2 of their own, Adolf and his little sister Paula. Adolf was nicknamed Addie as a baby and spoiled by his mother because he was her first child to live past the age of 2. She lost 3 babies before Addie was born, a year later, a young son. After Alois retired, he moved his family at least 7 times, placing Adolf Hitler in 5 different schools throughout his youth and childhood. One of those was a Catholic school, where Adolf joined the choir, took voice lessons, and briefly even considered the priesthood. But according to Adolf himself, he was too hard to handle in school. He was a ringleader and too violent of arguments he had with his classmates. Adolf said that of all his subjects, he cared only for world history because he had an interesting teacher. How about that? The rest of his instructors were, in his opinion, slightly mad, congenital idiots, and tyrants. He pulled many a prank on them, including the release of cockroaches in the classroom. Apparently, Adolf Hitler's teachers thought little of him in return. One instructor described young Adolf as argumentative, autocratic, self-opinionated, bad-tempered, and unable to submit to any school discipline. One of Hitler's few friends wrote this of Adolf Hitler: "He saw everywhere only obstacles and hostility. He was always up against something and at odds with the world. I never saw him take anything lightly." I believe Hitler's friend was right. Adolf Hitler rarely took anything lightly. As a boy, most of the games he played were war games. He obsessed over battle stories and argued a lot with his father. One of their quarrels was over whether or not Austria should be part of Germany. You see, Austria borders Germany, and while it was not part of the German Empire at that time in history, it was home to 3 million German-speaking Austrians. Some Austrians wished for a German state, while others did not. This situation was portrayed in the beautiful true story movie of The Sound of Music. Well, Hitler's father was pure Austrian and one of those who did not identify with the German people, and he did not want to be part of Germany. Adolf Hitler did. That fact would change history. Hitler believed he was German through and through and provoked his Austrian father to anger with German sayings and customs. Another ongoing quarrel between Hitler and his father was Adolf's choice of career. Alois wished his son to be a civil servant like himself, But Adolf wanted to pursue art. He wanted to be an artist and painter so badly that he sabotaged his own education. How does a kid do that? Well, Adolf thought that if he did badly enough in technical school, his father would send him to art school. Adolf's strategy backfired. His father died when he was 13, and Adolf's poor marks in middle school only made high school more difficult. In and out of boarding institutions, he never graduated. As a high school dropout and the head of the household at age 16, Adolf Hitler did as he pleased rather than help his family. His indulgent mother allowed this. He traveled to Vienna and wandered around the city visiting operas and museums, reading the tabloids, and practicing drawing. Along the way, he discovered a passion for architecture but failed to pursue it. Still hoping for art school, Adolf drew on his inheritance to take an entrance exam to the Vienna Academy of Fine Arts. His ego took a hard blow when, in 1907, he was twice rejected from the school. That same year, his mother died of cancer. Hitler was sincerely devastated at this. This leads us to what Adolf Hitler would describe as 5 years of misery. Those were the years after his mother's death when he found himself poverty-stricken, with no trade, no work ethic. He was suddenly penniless and homeless on the streets of Vienna. Without a doubt, these tough years hardened Adolf Hitler. He wrote in his autobiography, "While the goddess of suffering took me in her arms, often threatening to crush me, my will to resistance grew, and in the end, this will was victorious. I owe it to that period that I grew hard and am capable of being hard." Now, lest you feel pity for this vagabond, let me tell you the very next thing Hitler wrote in his autobiography that depicts his warped and hateful side. He stated this: "In this period, my eyes were opened to the two menaces of which I had previously scarcely known the names: Marxism and Jewry." Menaces? Yes, Hitler believed that the Jewish people were a menace to society. It was in Vienna during his own period of despair that Adolf Hitler grew to deeply despise the Jewish people and blame them for the social ills around him. In particular, he blamed economic problems on Jews who were prosperous, and many of the merchant class were. Since Karl Marx was born a Jew, Hitler inaccurately associated all Jews with Marxism, which he hated and which he believed was growing to be a great threat to Germany. As Hitler put it, the Jewish doctrine of Marxism rejects the aristocratic principle of nature and replaces the internal privilege of power and strength by the mass of numbers and their dead weight. We'll come back to Hitler's extreme racism and our lessons on the Holocaust. The Great War and the Weimar Republic. At age 24, Adolf Hitler tried to join the German army but failed his physical exam. Determined to be part of World War I, which to him was exhilarating, he volunteered his services to the army as a messenger. To be taken more seriously, he grew a wide Kaiser-style mustache and wore a German uniform. On the Western Front, Hitler saw firsthand the Battle of the Somme and the Third Battle of Ypres. Remember those? As a result of his World War I service, Hitler was wounded twice, decorated twice for bravery, and promoted to corporal. At the close of World War I, Hitler was hospitalized for temporary blindness caused by poison gas. When it was announced at the hospital that Germany was signing an armistice to end the war, Hitler buried his head in his hands and he wept. With no family, no career, no girl back home, no real friends to speak of, Hitler had nothing to live for but the love of war and an obsession with German power. It's no wonder he would not accept the defeat of his homeland and was spelled out in the Treaty of Versailles. Now, politically speaking, Germany was forced to regroup after World War I. In 1919, the German people did just that by setting up the Weimar Republic. It gave Germany a constitution, a president, and a two-house parliament consisting of the Reichstag and the Reichsrat. A chancellor headed the Reichstag, remember that. Though the new government looked good on paper, in reality, the Weimar Republic was weak and inefficient. The instability of the Weimar Republic was the talk of the German nation. Germany was ripe for some form of revolution, and the door was wide open for new political parties. One such party was the German Workers' Party. It met in a beer hall in Munich and was started by Anton Drexler. Drexler was a disgruntled nationalist looking for someone to blame for Germany's defeat in World War I. He blamed the former Kaiser. He blamed capitalists. He blamed communists. He blamed Jews. Here is where things get really interesting. Adolf Hitler, just after the war, was sent by the German army to spy on Drexler and the German Workers' Party. The government wanted to know what this group was up to. As fate would have it, Hitler not only spied on the German Workers' Party, but he joined it and he resigned from the army. You see, after several meetings, Adolf Hitler had an aha moment when he discovered that he had a knack for politics, along with a talent for public speaking. Spouting off in beer halls of Munich, he learned that others would listen to him. Bear that in mind. This young man had a long list of failures up his sleeve and hardly had any friends. Therefore, he enjoyed the small crowds that applauded his fury-filled speeches, laced with dramatic hand gestures, serious pauses, and the crossing of his arms in the authoritative manner of an angry parent. He chose also around this time to trim down his mustache to a third of what it was and wear a toothbrush-style facial hair for distinction. That worked well for Hitler. More often than not, the toothbrush mustache is simply called the Hitler mustache and remains a symbol of his ferocious leadership style. Now pay close attention to the next fact. In 1920 to 1921, Hitler gained control of the German Workers' Party and renamed it the National Socialist German Workers' Party. I'm going to say that again. National Socialist German Workers' Party. National Socialist in German is National Socialist. Well, they give it to you here. Look, do you guys want to see this? I'm going to hold it up there for you. It's a big word. They give it to us in German. Where was I? An abbreviation of that word is actually Nazi. N-A-Z-I. Aha! I think you've heard of the Nazis before. This was their beginning, the National Socialist German Workers' Party. Continuing to meet in beer halls, the new Nazi party grew slowly at first. Hitler's first followers were seedy characters with little education. But Adolf Hitler was masterful at promoting the cause of National Socialism by drawing posters, recruiting funds, and hosting rallies. Attendance began to soar at Nazi meetings, reaching 6,000 by 1921. The meeting halls were packed the nights that Adolf Hitler took the stage. With clenched fists, waving arms, and that iconic mustache, Hitler rattled on and on to his listeners about the need for Germans from all surrounding nations to unite in order to save the fatherland. He also cried out against the Treaty of Versailles and publicly blamed Marxists and Jews for the economic woes of Germany. Okay. The beer hall putsch. Hitler's most daring rally was held on November 8th to 9th in 1923. It was really more of a revolt than a rally, and so had been nicknamed the Beer Hall Putsch, or Munich Putsch, which means revolt. Inspired by Mussolini's brazen march on Rome, Adolf Hitler entered a Munich beer hall with a gun and 600 armed hoodlums. He shot off the gun to gain attention and proceeded to take 3 Bavarian officials to a back room at gunpoint. Bavaria, by the way, is the largest state in Germany, and Munich is its capital. Hitler pleaded with the officials to join the Nazi rank. They refused. Did he take no for an answer? No. Hitler continued to hold the men by force. He then marched to the podium and sold a pack of lies to the alarmed crowd. Hitler falsely reported that the Bavarian officials had agreed to join the National Socialist. Hitler's deceitful move and a flashy show of violence did not go unnoticed. He was arrested for the failed coup and to take control of the Bavarian government and was sentenced to 5 years in prison. However, the trial preceding his sentences would appear to backfire on the officials. It drew positive attention to Hitler rather than negative. It brought him national fame, something he desperately craved. From all the publicity Hitler received, his sentence was reduced to 9 months in pleasant quarters with assistance at his disposal. Hitler used the time in prison to write his first volume of Mein Kampf, a rambling mixture of autobiography and mission. Mein Kampf, by the way, means my struggle or my battle. It refers to Adolf Hitler's struggle to build a pure German race and his desire to conquer most of Europe. He used Mein Kampf to promote himself as the solution to Germany's problems with statements like this: in world history, the man who really rises above the norm of the broad average usually announces himself personally. And that he did. Upon release from his pampered imprisonment, Hitler moved full force with his plan to convert all Germany to National Socialism. He finished the second volume of Mein Kampf and proceeded to recruit more men into his private army of soldiers. Similar to Mussolini's black shirt police, Hitler's soldiers were originally nicknamed brown shirts for the color of their uniforms. In time, they expanded to become the Schutzstaffel, or the SS for short. Hitler later created the Gestapo, a secret police under the SS, to do the real dirty work of the Nazis. Skeptics believed that Hitler, private army and all, would fall flat on his face, but he didn't. Nor did his private brown shirts army that numbered 500,000 by 1932. Hitler used every means of propaganda to sway Germans to his ideas. Before his long-winded, finger-pointing speeches, he dazzled crowds at outdoor rallies with spotlights, drum squads, bugle corps, and aviation tricks. Giving Hitler the appearance of a powerful leader, his crisply dressed soldiers stood motionless at his rallies in picture-perfect lines. When they marched, they adopted the intimidating Stike March, or Goose Step March, with legs lifted high and straight in unison. Many nations used this military march, but the Nazis drew worldwide attention to it. I think you already know the symbol that was adopted and sewn on every Nazi banner, flag, poster, and uniform. It was the swastika, and I'll show you a picture in the book. You probably recognize that. Hitler borrowed this distinguished equilateral cross from history. He probably first saw the symbol on a wall of a church he sang in as a boy. The term swastika comes from Sanskrit and means good luck or good well-being. Using his flair for artistry, Hitler personally designed the black Nazi swastika to stand out rather boldly in a white round circle set in a striking red background. Let's just say the design worked in establishing an unforgettable image for the Nazis. His personal bodyguards later resurrected the gloomy Totenkopf symbol, which is the familiar skull and crossbones of death. In 1932, Hitler raised the stakes of his political career, opting for a legal way to rule the nation. He ran for president with the promise of helping Germany out of the worldwide Great Depression. Flying from one city to another, Hitler ran a good campaign. But lacking any real government experience, he was defeated by Paul von Hindenburg, the popular military leader who led Germany through World War I. 1 year later, however, in 1933, Hitler maneuvered the president into appointing him as chancellor. As mentioned earlier, the Chancellor of Germany was the head of the Reichstag, one segment of the two-house parliament. Had Hitler stopped there in his lust for power, history might have been different. But he pressed on for more Nazi authority by creating an imaginary crisis. He and the SS set fire to the Reichstag and blamed it on the communists. This act of burning democracy to the ground literally helped swing a large number of voters in the next election to join the National Socialist Party, the Nazis. The Nazis were just short of majority rule in Germany, but they got around it. They passed an emergency act giving Hitler 4 years of special power. He was everything but president and commander-in-chief. This was the opening of Pandora's box. With the Nazis in power and other political parties in Germany were ransacked or disbanded or their members mysteriously disappeared. For example, in 1933, 19,000 Germans supposedly died by suicide. Another 16,000 politically active persons died of natural causes. Really? Concentration camps were popping up overnight for anyone opposing the Nazis. Like Lenin and Stalin, Hitler used brute force. behind the scenes at first, to gain control over those around him. Believing that the end justifies the means, Hitler had a true Machiavellian mindset. A few Germans, including Anton Drexler, found the German Workers' Party recognized early on that Hitler was very dangerous. Party members publishing a scathing pamphlet about Hitler's character, calling him a demagogue. That's a leader who wins support by pulling on people's emotions and making false promises. They wrote this about Hitler. A lust for power and personal ambition have caused Adolf Hitler to return to his post. It grows more and more clear that his purpose is simply to use the National Socialist Party as a springboard for his own immoral purposes, and to seize the leadership in order to force the party onto a different track at the psychological moment. Make no mistake, Hitler is a demagogue. The words of the pamphlet were prophetic. Hitler did just as his party members suspected, and he used the Nazis to reach his ultimate goal of complete dictatorship. You see, in 1934, Paul von Hindenburg, the president of Germany, died. Wouldn't you know that just one day before Hindenburg's death, the Nazis conveniently passed a law meshing the positions of president and chancellor into one. Who was chancellor? Hitler was. With the death of Germany's president and the merger of positions, Hitler, at this pivotal moment in history, became the highest leader in Germany. And this was accomplished without a bloody civil war and without an election, though the Constitution called for it. Hitler's placement would appear legal. As head of state, Hitler also became commander-in-chief of the military. Soldiers under him were asked to swear personal allegiance to Hitler rather than to his position, as had been tradition. Furthermore, Hitler adopted the title Der Führer, which means the leader. And like the Caesars of ancient times, he wished to be addressed and saluted with a Hail. In German, that would be the familiar Hail Hitler, with the extension of the right arm towards the Führer. So, there you have the uncanny rise of Adolf Hitler. I gave a lengthy report on his ascension to power for a reason. When we get to the rest of the story, I think we'll be inclined to scratch our heads like the rest of the world and ask this: how did this madman ever get started? It is hard to believe that this lonesome and underachieving heckler and the high school dropout would ever rise to fame and gather such fanatical devotion. But by 1934, Hitler truly was the Führer of the Third Reich. Perhaps there was just a little bit of genius lurking behind his barking facade and tightly trimmed mustache. In closing, if you are wondering where the term Third Reich came from, let me explain. Reich means empire or realm. According to most Germans, the first significant German empire was under Otto I, or Otto the Great, who formed the Holy Roman Empire in 1962. The second great German empire was that formed under Otto von Bismarck in 1871. He unified the loosely organized German states. The Third Reich commonly refers to the Nazi empire established by Adolf Hitler, which, as previously mentioned, he once boasted would last for 1,000 years. In the next two lessons, we'll look at the undeniable evil that came with this empire, namely the Holocaust. Okay, thanks for listening, and we will do the Holocaust tomorrow.